when we think about these three levels of business, employee works with what they have. If they ain't got it, then they're like, well, I can't do this. A CEO manages resources. A founder creates resources. Even if we don't have it, that don't mean I can't go get it. It's rare that someone sits like all at one level across all of these different rows, right? I want you to be thinking about, where do you sit? Welcome back to another episode of the Seven Figure Educator podcast. My name is Dr. Erica Jordan Thomas. I am a former teacher, former school principal, Harvard grad turned full-time entrepreneur. I'm CEO and founder of Seven Figure Educator, where we help educators like you monetize their brilliance by converting that into a seven-figure education consulting business. On today's episode, I wanted to talk through the three types of mindsets that exist in business. And the reason why I want to have an episode on this is actually something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and in particular, like the last 12-ish months, because I have always kind of heard the language of like, you got to think like a CEO, of as if that is kind of the goal of thinking like a CEO, having a CEO mindset. And one of my learning development goals has been prioritizing getting into rooms with other 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. And as I have been in these really deep, rich learning spaces with folks who are at my similar stage of business of multiple 7 figures, folks who are a couple stages ahead of me at 8 figures, 9 figures, I realized that their goal actually isn't a CEO mindset. Like, that is not the goalpost in those rooms. There is actually a level beyond that the conversation sits at. And so I wanted to have the opportunity to be able to break down, okay, well, what is that next level? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And I also wanted to have this conversation because as we're engaging with our clients in our community, educators who are building, growing, and scaling their education consulting business, they have to go through these levels of this mindset shift. And I've seen how there's some tension that can happen for folks in their business if they don't have the language to kind of put to the destination of the mindset or the orientation of the mindset. And they're kind of stuck in their 9-to-5 mindset, right? Which is going to create lots of tension when you're trying to build a business. So I first want to kind of tell you a quick story that for me was like the aha of like, oh my gosh, I think I kind of have the wrong goal of this like CEO mindset. So I was in a room of about 75 other entrepreneurs. There's a membership organization that I'm a part of. And in order to have membership, you have to be generating at least 1 million in annual revenue in your business. So I'm with other members of the organization from all over the world. 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. And the conversation in the room, folks kept asking one another of like, well, how much do you work in the business? Or, folks were saying, well, I give maybe about 5 hours a week. I check in with the CEO. And I'm like, oh, you checking in with the CEO, meaning you ain't the CEO. And there's this goal that people had of really, it was around backwards planning from an exit. And not everybody, wants to exit their business. And when I say exit their business, that could be hiring a CEO. It could be selling the business, right? But either way, when you have that mind frame of you're exiting a business, you're building a business that operates without you. And so if that's the goal of building a business that operates without you, that's actually not a CEO mindset. Because a CEO is deep in the trenches, involved in the day-to-day. That's not building a business that operates without you. So as I keep having more and more of these conversations, I became to realize that this level above CEO is something called a... Hey y'all, I want to take a quick moment to pop in. I know the episode's getting really, really juicy, but I could not miss the opportunity to make sure that you know that we are headed to Atlanta October 3rd through 5th for Seven Figure Educator Live. This is my 3-day live event. It is the only 3-day live event for education consultants who are out here making a big impact and getting a big bang. And even if you feel like your bank ain't that big yet, I want you in the room because that's how your bank gets bigger, okay? I have curated a very special 3-day agenda that includes powerhouse speakers, 7, 8, 9-figure speakers, intentional networking to find your people, to find your next opportunity. Y'all, we're getting ready to take the city over, and we're taking it over at a 5-star property, okay? Meet me in Atlanta October 3rd through 5th. Grab your ticket by heading to sevenfigureeducator.com. I'll link it in the show notes, and I'll see you there. It's something called a founder. I want to take an opportunity and actually break down the differences between these 3 types of mindsets, defining what a CEO, defining what a founder is, and defining that third mindset, which is the entry point for many of us into business, but it cannot be the ending point. So let's go ahead and break it down because I want to give us a couple of examples of what these 3 mindsets are, the differences between them. And as we go throughout this conversation, I really want you to take advantage of kind of the meta moment of like, which of these mindsets are you operating from, right? And this could give you the language to help explain some of the tension you might be feeling in your business because of what level you might be operating at. So the first level that when we're talking about the 3 levels of mindset, the first is actually an employee. And it is absolutely possible to own a business but still be thinking like an employee. And I'm going to give you an analogy for that here in a moment. Then we have the CEO, where this is kind of zooming up from a level where you're thinking a little bit bigger picture. And then lastly, we have founder. So the analogy that I think is really fitting here to kind of explain the differences between these things, these 3, is I like to think of the analogy of an orchestra. And this is like my former bandie coming out. Okay, shout out to all my bandies. But when you think about the analogy of an orchestra, well, an employee would be equivalent to the orchestra players, right? They're the folks that are executing, they're implementing, they're doing, they're playing the instruments, right? And then when you think about the CEO you can think of as the conductor, where they are steering the ship. They are setting the pace. They're creating the culture of unity. They're telling people when to come in, when to pause, like they are the captain of the ship. But when we think about the founder, well, what's the role of the founder? Well, if we got the players, if we got the conductor, well, who could the founder possibly be? Well, the founder I would consider to be the composer. And here's what's fascinating when we think about this is if you were to go to an orchestra performance, you actually don't see the composer. But the whole thing can't happen without the composer, where the composer is writing the music. The composer actually created the thing that we see. They are the innovator, they are the designer. The CEO then is the person who then conducts and sets the pace, and they create the plan, they manage the plan. And the employee are the players that are actually playing the plan. They're executing the plan, they're implementing the plan. So when we think about these 3 levels of business, we've got employee mindset, we've got a CEO mindset, and then we have a founder's mindset. I think this is really, really helpful language to put in perspective the journey, the thoughts, actions, beliefs that you could be operating with, because there are certain levels of business where you're going to experience tension if you're operating like an employee. There are certain levels of business where you're going to experience tension if you're operating like a CEO. And that's what we've always been told is like, you got to think like a CEO, but there is actually a level of business where you have got to move like a founder. So let's kind of break down some examples of the different ways of thinking for each one of these 3 kind of mindsets. So let's first consider priorities. So how do each of these 3 mindsets prioritize? Or what do they prioritize? So for an employee always prioritizes safety. And I want to take a moment to kind of sit on this for a second because I see this come up for so many entrepreneurs, for a lot of our clients who are in the earliest stage of business, particularly when you're still working a 9 to 5. What prioritizing safety looks like is you are over reliant on the steady paycheck every other week, where that is actually one of your biggest fears for why you're hesitant to start a business, is because you're thinking about the steady paycheck every other week, or you're thinking about your retirement or your pension. You're like, well, what about my retirement account? And it's hard for you to think about continuing to grow your business because you don't want to relieve your retirement account. Which, a side note, as an entrepreneur, I still have a retirement account, right? But I say this because on the flip side of it, when I'm in these rooms of 7, 8, 9 figure entrepreneurs, imagine there being an overflow in business that you're not even concerned of whether or not you have enough money to retire, because that's a given, right? So there's a little bit of this safety that's really a tie and commitment to scarcity thinking versus an abundant thinking of what are the possibilities that could exist in your business. So employees always prioritize safety. They prioritize security, job security, right? So next, let's think about the CEO. What are some of the priorities of the CEO? Well, the CEO prioritizes efficiency. So, from a CEO mindset, the CEO is the one who's managing the ship, right? So, they're determining the team, they're managing budget, they're, looking at the strategic plan and they're determining the direction. So, they're prioritizing being most efficient with people, with resources, with budget in order to hit the end goal. And then when we think about a founder, what does a founder prioritize? Well, a founder prioritizes alignment. Given what we are deciding to do in the business, is this actually aligned to my values? Is this actually aligned to my legacy? Is this aligned to what I want to do in the world, the impact that I want to do in the world? And if it's not aligned to that vision, to the legacy that I want to leave, I'm not doing it, right? So there's a very, very different perspective of prioritizing safety versus prioritizing alignment, and thinking through how might you make decisions differently if you prioritize alignment versus prioritizing safety. All right, let's think about how they solve problems. So, from an employee standpoint, an employee is like, tell me what to do. Meaning, they just want to be told the plan. They aren't really interested in thinking up the plan. They're like, just tell me what to do and I will execute, right? And there's a role for that in the world for someone who's a strong executor. But when it comes to running a business, like, you are going to have to create the plan. You're going to have to figure it out, right? This expectation as an entrepreneur who's running a business that people should just be able to tell you what to do in your business, that's actually an employee mindset. And that might be one of the reasons why you're experiencing tension and trying to grow your business, is because you're expecting other people to tell you what to do in your business, right? So that's from an employee standpoint. From a CEO standpoint, what they prioritize is they make the plan. So a CEO doesn't wait to be told what to do. They don't wait for direction. They don't wait for an answer. They actually come up with an answer. And then the founder asks a really powerful question. They ask, is this problem even worth solving? So they zoom up a level to determine, is this even the best use of time, energy, of resources? Again, alignment. Like, does it even make sense for this to be a question that we spend time on? Next, I want us to think through these 3 different mindsets of how they use resources. Employee works with what they have. If they ain't got it, then they're like, well, I can't do this. So they're typically not going out looking for other resources. They're not looking to create other resources. Whatever is in front of their face is what they're using. If they ain't got it, they're like, oh, well, I can't make it happen. A CEO manages resources. So you might have to, all right, if we have this type of software, if we have these people, a CEO is thinking of the third way of, we may not have the exact resource that we need, but is there a way to kind of pull this from here, pull this from there, and then when we combine these things together, it can actually give us what we need. A founder creates resources. So even if we don't have it, that don't means I can't go get it. So whether that is additional revenue, additional capital, additional people, they'll go and figure out a way. They will create it. So I want you to think about the way in which excuses live at each of these three levels, right? Where an employee will often give what they will call reasons, but actually are excuses as to why something can't be done. A CEO isn't going to give excuses, but they're going to make things happen. A founder, excuses aren't a possibility, right? Like, I always have the power to create what my business needs. That's the world that a founder lives in. And then lastly, let's think about risk. An employee, what do you think they do with risk? Avoid. They are like, I don't want no risk. Again, going back to the fact that they prioritize safety, they hate risk. They do not want you to take a risk. They want to do things the way that they have always been done. So if it requires me to take some level of risk, I want no parts of it. All right? And so a CEO, they manage risk. So they might do a risk analysis. They might weigh pros and cons to be able to see what risk is worth taking given our goals, given the available resources. They aren't avoidant of risk, but they're really thoughtful of what risks that they take. And then from a founder level, the founder dances with risk. A founder actually loves risk. And I think what's really, really important, the differentiator here between managing risk and dancing with the risk, as a founder, you understand that there is nothing that can take you out. Hey there, I'm popping in really quickly to make sure that you knew about my Seven Figure Business School. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while, I teach live for 5 days straight. Baby, I'm still a teacher at heart, and it gives me so much joy to teach about the foundations of a seven-figure business. During the 5 days, I'll teach you how to package your offers, I'll teach you pricing, I'll teach you $1 million sales that aren't salesy, and I'll teach you how to find folks to go and pitch your offers to immediately. So do not wait. Go ahead, head to the show notes, and I want you to click the link to sign up for our next business school. I'll see you there. You believe so deeply in who you are, how you were designed, your DNA, that you know there's no possible way you can lose. That doesn't mean you don't take an L, but you believe in your bounce back nature, that you're like, even if this don't work out, it ain't gonna take me out. Like, I'm gonna figure it out. And so from a founder standpoint, we're always thinking about, how do we make a way? What is this? If I know that there's something that is in the best interest of my business and it has a particular price tag, it's not a conversation of whether or not we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. It's just, what's the strategy to make it happen? Right? And is it a risk? If the price tag is 100K, yeah, that might be a risk, but I'm leaving with something, right? Like, I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna sign up for it. I'm gonna enroll in the thing. I'm gonna take advantage of the learning, and I'm leaving with something to make my money back plus more. So I want you to be thinking about, where do you sit? A couple things to be able to note here. It's rare that someone sits like all at one level across all of these different rows, right? Where you might be an employee when it comes to the fact that you prioritize safety, but like when it comes to solving problems, you're questioning, is the problem worth solving, or you make a plan, right? So you might be sitting in different categories across different areas. And I want you to think about, where are you overwhelmingly operating from? Are you overwhelmingly operating as an employee in your business? Because if you're overwhelmingly thinking like an employee in your business, that's probably why your business isn't growing. That's probably why you feel overwhelmed by your business, because you're avoiding risk. You're looking for someone to tell you what to do. You're not thinking bigger around the potential resources available to you. You're operating like an employee. right? And there are some ways that you probably could be thinking like a founder, and those are ways for you to be leaning into more. So I share this with you as a way to kind of do a little bit of a self-assessment to be able to see where you are, to also to be able to see what your growth opportunities are. So that's it for this episode. I hope you have gotten something from it, something meaningful. Let me know in the comments what sticks out to you. And if you enjoyed this content, A, hit the subscribe button, and then B, share it with a friend, because sharing is caring, and we want to make sure that we are providing access to this type of content to as many educators as possible. So share this with an educator friend that you adore. I will see you back here next time on the Seven Figure Educator podcast.